Coming up next on Jersey Matters, we'll talk to an assemblyman who's expected to run for governor of New Jersey. He says he has a plan to tackle New Jersey's three-headed monster: school funding, pensions, and property taxes. And a unique job training program in New Jersey. It turns out that when a company spends some time to train its employees properly, business improves. Who knew? Next, because Jersey Matters. Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. According to our next guest, New Jersey has three crises: school funding, pensions, and property taxes, and all three are tied together. Meet Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, 16th District. He's a Republican, and he serves Somerset, Middlesex, Hunterdon, and Mercer County. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Larry, thanks for having me.
So you have these three crises that you say are all tied together. Which one do you go after first?
Oh, without a doubt, school funding. The other two are, they're all intertwined, but it's a domino effect, and the school funding crisis comes first.
So you have a proposal that you've put out, and one of the parts of the proposal is that every district has to pay at least 25% of its school budget. Is that correct?
That's one aspect of fixing the overall school funding crisis. It's one that I believe in. It's important because every community needs to have a skin in the game. Right now, you have local school boards that can strike a school budget. They get federal aid, they get state aid, and then what's left is the local property tax levy. In some cases, that's only 5 cents or 10 cents on the dollar. I don't consider that a skin in the game. It's not fair when other communities are subsidizing that community school district.
And the effect of that would be that it would save some state funding?
It would free up enormous sums of state school aid that we could use to take care of the pension crisis, and then once that's taken care of, property tax relief.
When you say enormous, have you put a number on this?
Oh, you bet. Of the 580 school districts, there are 200 that are considered overfunded to the tune of $600 million. That's a large chunk of change.
Now, there are poorer districts that get a lot of state and federal aid, and you're going after property tax abatements in those districts, is that right?
In part, but we need to be honest with ourselves. There are always going to be some communities in New Jersey that need more help than others. The question then becomes, how much? So when you take a look at a place like Jersey City with a $600 million school budget, and $100 million comes from the feds, and $400 million comes from the state, and they're only funding $100 million of their $600 million school budget, I think we have a terrible imbalance and something blatantly unfair.
What's wrong with the abatements, though?
Well, what's wrong with the abatements? The notion of allowing commercial properties or new residential properties to not pay taxes, and when the rest of the state is funding your school system, something seems unfair to me about that. Now, if you want to encourage economic development by abating municipal and county taxes, that's one thing, but you should not be allowed to abate school taxes when the rest of the state is paying for your school system.
And you said that these three crises are tied, and you might have some people that say, oh great, they free up money, they can put it into the pension fund. And yet part of your proposal is to get teachers, and this has been proposed before, get teachers to give back, especially when it comes to health insurance and to the pension. Is that correct?
Well, the 2011 reform did a great job of having teachers and state workers contribute more toward their pension, but in my opinion, it did a poor job on the post-retirement health care benefit. That is a huge nut, and it's getting bigger all the time. So even if we were making the full pension payment to this point, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be having a conversation today on how to reform the post-retirement health care benefit.
But the money that you're going to get, is any of that going to go into the pension fund?
Oh, you bet. In fact, what I've said to the unions is this. The proposal I'm making to recalibrate school funding, I'm not even talking about taking that savings in the short term and giving property tax relief. I think we have to solve the pensions first. And that's why an organization like NJEA should get behind my proposal. NGA should support this because we're going to take the savings first to take care of the pension crisis second. And then the third domino is the property tax
Let's
crisis.
get to the property tax in a second, because some of the people that some of the unions would say, look, the pension fund is it has been underfunded for so long, and they blame Governor Christie, although I don't think he's the only governor that was underfunding it, but they blame him for doing it, and they say, we're not going to give any givebacks whatsoever until that's funded. I've heard that time and time again. That doesn't work with your plan.
Well, here's the way I look at it. The pensions are underfunded primarily for three reasons. One is the way the state school aid works. That's number one. Two, the post-retirement health care benefit is still too generous. And three, we need a recalibration because people are living into their 80s and 90s. No type of benefit is sustainable when people are retired more years than they were working.
So you want to eventually get out of the pension game altogether, right? I mean, you would like to see kind of like a 401k.
Without a doubt. All new hires in the state and school districts should be in a 401k. What's interesting about that is the moment you say 401k, the employee union leadership immediately conveys this message that the employer is putting in less. That's not necessarily the case. But when it's a defined benefit that guarantees your pension over the course of 35 or 40 years, that doesn't work. That's why 401ks work. That's not the way they work.
Now, before we get to what kind of chance this has in a Democratic legislature, let's roll it all over into the property taxes. How does this affect property tax in the state?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, when you take a look at anyone's property tax bill, 70 to 80% of the bill is the school system. And the reason why it's so expensive in 550 of our 580 school districts is because they get very little state aid. And the reason they get very little state aid is because 30 of our school districts, only 5%, get 60% of the funding. We've been doing that for 40 years. The formula does a terrible job of considering whether or not a community has been revitalized. Jersey City and Hoboken are two perfect examples of getting way more aid than they should. They should get nowhere near the aid they got 20 years ago. The type of revitalization that you've seen in places like Jersey City and Hoboken, that state aid should not be grandfathered in. It needs to be ratcheted down.
I'm not sure you answered the question on the property taxes. What would happen then if you were able to get more state funding and you were cut off some of this revitalization aid? Do you mean property taxes come down?
It's not revitalization aid, it's state school aid. And if we send less money to Jersey City and to Hoboken, whose school taxes are, comparatively speaking, unfairly low, if we send them less aid, we have more money to send to the other school districts to lower property taxes in those communities.
Oh, so only certain communities would see a reduction in property taxes under your plan?
Well, no, all communities. Now, again, we've got 580 school districts in our state. 30 are flush because they're considered, in the old days, Abbotts. They're no longer considered Abbotts, but they're still getting Abbott-like funding. 550 are in terrible shape, and we need to rebalance the formula.
Would this be revenue neutral in that the money you'd save would go to property tax reduction?
Second, it has to go to pensions first. And I think that's where I'm trying to demonstrate equity. This isn't a case of some suburban country club Republican trying to take money away from the urban centers to provide property tax relief in the suburbs. There's a middle step. We've got to get the pension system solvent. And the way to do that is by refocusing on the school funding formula first.
So does this have any chance at all of passing?
I think it does, because a great many Democrats have come to the realization that their districts are being disadvantaged by the current school funding formula. A great many have come to me and said, Jack, I'm with you. I agree with you on Jersey City. I agree with you on Hoboken.
But do they disagree with you with the union, the cutbacks in the union?
They do not. They're looking, as I am, for financial flexibility to make the pension payment.
Okay, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli. We'll talk about his possible run for governor and about Chris Christie in his new role in running the transition team with Donald Trump and other topics when Jersey Matters continues.